You're making God visible.
Well, as Tammy says, I guess that's my passion. Just, Mom, what's your passion? And I think, and that was years ago, and I think now my sewing is my passion.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is that joy of creation, and that joy of sharing, and that joy, in some cases, of making something beautiful, or touching someone, with a tremendous amount of love. So we got you now, right?
Yep.
The journal with the I wish, and also the pleasure of creation and letting yourself have that. And that will be much better than heart medicine that comes in a digitalis or something.
Oh.
No. Okay. Now, well, let's talk for a moment about jobs and education and the world. When you think about education, who's the captain that is steering the boat that your smaller boat has to sort of follow, right? And who's the captain in your work, who's made it go downhill, right? And then comes the decision, what can I do if the big boat's going this way? And I've still got my smaller boat, but I kind of like some of where that big boat's going, right? But I'll tell you a secret. When you change your inner happiness, and Tammy's just gone through this.
Oh yeah, huge.
The workplace changes. So what begins to happen is that rather than responding to the negativity and the gossip and the ain't it awful and blah blah blah, you take the time to dwell in your own knowing, your own well-being, your own presence, if you will, to the extent that your happiness quotient is already bubbling out the top before you go to work.
That's a challenge.
I know.
Because when you're driving to work and you know what it's going to be like,
But you
I like the challenge.
What you're saying is, I have to steel myself because work is going to control me.
Never thought about it that way.
So I have to barricade myself and wrap myself in duct tape and get ready for...
Well, I actually envision myself putting myself into one of those clear plastic bubbles so I can go into the office.
But you see...
It doesn't work.
No, of course not. Of course not. You're not a bubble boy or a bubble girl.
No, it was like, oh please God, just...
But you see, you're giving all of your power and authority to the job and the people there. You're saying, you're in charge of how I feel.
And logically I know that, so
Right.
I just need...
I'm going to give you some clarity, and I know Tammy can share some of what has changed for her, what had been quite miserable. Because what happens is, if you are not prepared, the larger boat and the wake of the larger boat, we'll stick with my metaphor here, will make your boat go topsy-turvy. So what you have to do is get your boat so steady that when you get in there, it's sort of like, And, second part, so creating your own happiness. And I'm not saying that's an easy job. However, what I'm saying is, when you set your course, your GPS, to living a life of peaceful, happy joy, in which I'm a good person, and I share my love and my light appropriately, I'm adding a few extra words, You can put it in whatever you like. You don't have the same energy. In a way, rather than creating a bubble to protect yourself, you've created a fountain. And your fountain is just a joyful place. And so the people around you will begin to respond to you rather than you having to respond to them. I'll give you a very clear example that I think might help. I hope one day you all can watch the movie of Mother Teresa that was made some years ago. But to just tell you the story, as most of you know, she was about 4'11", little teeny nun, right? Very diminutive, you know, not a big, I'm an authority kind of person. But how she carried herself, this is what I'm speaking to you about. So it isn't like being a big showboat. So there was an incident when they were bombing in Beirut. And Mother had decided that she needed to get into Beirut because one of the orphanages had been bombed. And the children in this particular orphanage all had spastic illnesses. You know what spastic is, right? Shaking, you know. And so they were desperate. There was no food, there was no water, and they were trying to get something done to get Mother and the ambulances through the fighting, right, to get to the orphanage and get the children out. And if you ever have a chance to see the movie, you'll see the general in all of his regalia saying, "Now, Mother, we can't take you. It's far too dangerous. All of the fighting is going on there. We can't take you. We know we should, but we can't." And one of the other big muckamucks in his big suit is saying, "Yes, Mother, it's far too dangerous. We really can't go." And she looked at them both and she said, "Well, that's why we have to go." And they kind of went, "Well, Mother, if there's a ceasefire, we'll take you." So she came and prayed to us, and we said, "We can do that." There was a ceasefire the next day. So Mother came and said, "Let's go." And so you watch the movie and you watch the ambulances coming into this chaotic place, right? You can imagine bombs have been going off, children are screaming, the lovely nurses and nuns are doing their best, but it's madness, it's chaos. And Mother, 4'11", walks in her presence, in her fountain of love and knowing, takes a moment and assesses what needs to happen. And she begins and she says, "Would you go there and bring those two to the ambulance? Would you go upstairs and do that? Would you go over there? You go and get this. You get the medical supplies." And in 5 or 6 minutes, a whole caravan began to be created, and there was quiet again. And one little boy was still screaming and lying in the crib, and Mother came over and rubbed his stomach and smiled at him, and he stopped. Now, what is that? That is the presence of love. And it is also the power of love. And so what we're talking about is really putting that to work in yourself. The presence and power of love of yourself first. Of yourself first. Because if you don't fill yourself first, you run out pretty quick. And so if you fill yourself with love, with joy, with whatever that would mean, whether it's quilting or looking at your little boy, or singing, or walking, or swimming, or meditating, or getting a pedicure, you know, or having a beautiful coffee with your sister, you know. It's realizing my first job is to be aligned with my goodness, my godness, my happiness. And when I'm lined up, now I can move in the world. I can, you know, do my job, be a mother, be a wife, go to work, go to school, because what I've done is I've allowed what I needed to be given to myself. And that is not selfish. It isn't. Because if you're to be in the world as a beautiful sister, daughter, mother, woman, right? If you're empty, trying to do it all, what are you doing? You're robbing yourself, and you're really, in a way, robbing everyone else of who you might be had you given yourself what you needed. And I know that all of this is not what they teach you in school. But that is where the big boat does need to go. And I want to come back to that in just a moment. But I want to really remind you of something you already knew. It's an inside job. And creating happiness in yourself is not selfish. It is what you're meant to do, to shine as you. And so your point of reference stops being what's happening at work. Your point of reference, your course, becomes I'm choosing to be happy and joyful. And I don't know if I will be here 20 years, 2 years, 2 minutes. But what I do know is it doesn't matter in another way. Because what keeps coming to me is to change. But perhaps the change is within. To get up 20 minutes earlier and have a glorious something in the morning that's all mine. Whether that's a walk or a communion with a squirrel or, a time of choosing to pick flowers, It's to lavish on yourself what so many of you would lavish on your children without a second thought. To lavish that on yourself. And then what happens is that fountain begins to, first of all, be cleaned out so it can flow again. And then it starts to flow. And then you walk in with a smile. And just as the gossip is contagious, so is happiness. What are you smiling about? I had the nicest thing this morning. I stopped for coffee and I talked to a squirrel. I don't know, right? Really? Well, and they'll start to think and they'll remember sometime they stopped to talk to a squirrel. And now you've got a whole different foundation of conversation. So you've changed the work environment.
Thank you.
And it's not your job to fix everyone else. But when you show up in that way, you give them an opportunity to hear a different note to become attuned to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So Fluxmobile over there, what do you mean you're in flux?
I'm relating to everything. A lot. I'm very disgruntled at work. Love my job. So I took lots of mental notes, and Christopher will replay this over and over again for me. I don't know, I'm just in a flux.
What I want to say is, I think of you as a fairly happy person. I really do. And I think the thing that begins to happen is that you forget about how creative and spontaneous you can be. And what I mean by that is, just as I gave you the suggestion to take some time before you get there, what I would suggest for you is a little bit different. I would suggest that you begin to cook up some interesting surprises to offer at work. Now, what are they? I leave that to your creative juice. But I want to share with you it used to be people always brought food, you know, I'll bring candy, I'll bring cookies, I'll bring cupcakes and all of that, and now we've got all these worries about food and gluten and everything else. But it's only one note.
Right.
And so part of what is happening today is people have gone on automatic pilot and forgotten what your little boy teaches you every minute. It's time to play, Mummy. And so I'm going to invite you, and I'll mention a few things. Many people will give you other ideas and you'll come up with some more. Get yourself some lovely little crystals, small, not expensive, and a little bowl. Get yourself the small angel cards that have just the one word on them, you know, the little teeny ones, and have another bowl, and have them on your desk. You scared yet?
No.
You see where this
Honestly,
is going?
Yes.
Right, right. And as someone's walking by, you know, and it feels right, you know, we don't need you to work with everyone,
Right.
but you begin to say, would you like a crystal today? This one represents peace. This one represents love. This one is, you know, whatever. Or how about an angel card? Come here, pick a card. See what your angels want to say to you.
That's true.
And so what begins to happen is, right, see, it's already happening. It's already happening.
Well, I share a cubicle, and the way my desk used to be was open. And I would do that, and people can't walk by without touching something on my desk. It's always been that way. Now they have to come in to see the Dollar Tree waivers. We've got, Susan and I, we're the party girls. We've got things hanging from the ceiling. I'm blushing. Things on the wall. So this is perfect, even with my cubicle mate. And
Right,
your energy.
right. And
the
every
two of us
once
would
in a while,
radiate
if you're
crazy.
heading over to the ladies' room, bring your bowl and walk by a few other desks and just say, hey, right?
I used to do things like that all the time, and not anymore because the environment has changed.
But you see, you can keep breathing into it,
True.
you know, and then it will really shift for you. Because part of being segregated in that way in the cubicle is you do feel cut off from how it used to be. But so you're still capable to change that without changing your desk.
That's fun.
So that would be my suggestion for you, to realize part of what's happening is the build up, not only in poor Barbara here with all the things you haven't ever said, but the world is experiencing the same thing.
Right.
And they don't know yet some of the things we're talking about here, but you can remind them. You can remind them. And that will help so many in the ways that we're speaking about. So you become your own serenity and your own peace. And then you don't worry so much what someone else is thinking or whether you're being a good mother. And what I want to say about you and your mother is that this strand of terror really is carried in perhaps millions of women right now. And every time something awful happens to any woman in the world right now, those of you that carry that memory in your very cells feel it. So part of what you and your mother are experiencing is what's happening in Iraq or Africa or other places. And so when you begin to realize that, it's not to say desensitize yourself. It's to realize, what can I do in this moment to alleviate that suffering? And so you become a minister of prayer. And when I say that, again, there's many ways to do that. But what it might be for you is when you feel that, just say, I now send the power of love to myself, to my mother, to her mother, to all the mothers, to all the daughters, to all the women, to know we are creating a world where that kind of terror cannot exist. And you look at your little boy, and your beautiful husband and the beautiful men in this room and the other men that you know, and you realize these are the men that are changing the world, from a place where women have been terrified to a place where women are so happy to be with you. So you, again, it requires a different response. And just as I made that suggestion to Barbara, it's stopping in that moment and saying, I feel something. This is the terror of all women, to not be enough, to be somehow annihilated in the wrongly held belief that somehow that's all right for someone to do something like that to me. And you look at your little boy and your husband and these men and you say, not on my watch and not on their watch. And so